The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and pine as Emily and her husband, Mark, pulled into the driveway of their new home. It was a sprawling two-story colonial, nestled at the edge of a quiet town in upstate New York. The house had been a steal, far below market value, and though the realtor had been vague about its history, Emily chalked it up to a desperate seller. The windows gleamed under the afternoon sun, and the wraparound porch creaked softly as they stepped onto it, their footsteps echoing like whispers in the stillness. Inside, the house felt alive in a way Emily couldn't quite place. The hardwood floors shone, polished to a mirror-like finish, and the high ceilings made every sound, a cough, a laugh, bounce back with an eerie delay. Mark was thrilled, already talking about where to put the TV, but Emily lingered in the foyer, her fingers brushing the wallpaper. It was old, floral, with faint stains that looked like they'd been scrubbed too hard. She shivered, though the house was warm, and told herself it was just the excitement of a new chapter. That night, they slept on an air mattress in the master bedroom, their furniture still en route. The room was cavernous, with a single window overlooking the backyard, a black void beyond the glass. Emily lay awake, listening to the house settle. Creaks came from the attic, soft at first, like footsteps pacing in circles. She nudged Mark, who mumbled about old pipes and rolled over. But the sounds grew sharper, more deliberate, as if something was testing the floorboards, searching for a weak spot. By morning, Emily was exhausted, her dreams fragmented by images of shadowed figures standing just out of sight. She didn't mention it to Mark, who was already unpacking boxes in the kitchen, humming to himself. Instead, she explored the house, determined to shake off her unease. The basement door was locked, the key nowhere to be found, and the attic hatch was bolted shut, which struck her as odd for a supposedly empty house. In the living room, she found a small carving in the baseboard, a crude eye, etched so deeply it looked like it had been clawed into the wood. The day passed in a blur of unpacking, but the house seemed to resist their efforts. Boxes tipped over when no one was near. A glass shattered in the sink, though Emily swore she'd placed it on the counter. By dusk, she felt watched, her skin prickling as if eyes were tracking her from every corner. That night, the creaks returned, louder, closer, now accompanied by a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. Emily sat up, heart pounding, and stared at the window. For a moment, she thought she saw a face, pale, eyeless, pressed against the glass. But when she blinked, it was gone. Mark laughed off her fears, blaming stress, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the house was studying them, waiting for something. She began to notice patterns. The creak stopped when she spoke aloud, as if listening. The air grew heavy in certain rooms, like the house was holding its breath. On the third night, she woke to a low hum, not mechanical but alive, vibrating through the walls. It wasn't coming from the attic or the basement, it was everywhere, pulsing like a heartbeat. She clutched Mark's hand, but he didn't stir, his breathing unnaturally deep. Alone in the dark, Emily whispered, "Who's there?" The hum stopped. Silence pressed against her, thick and suffocating, and then, from somewhere below, a single floorboard groaned. A week into their stay, Emily's unease had grown into a quiet dread. The house no longer felt like a home but a puzzle, each room hiding a piece she wasn't sure she wanted to find. Mark remained oblivious, throwing himself into renovations, but Emily couldn't ignore the signs. Lights flickered in rooms they hadn't wired yet. Doors swung open an inch overnight, just enough to notice. And the carving of the eye wasn't alone, she found others, tucked in corners, hidden under rugs, each one slightly different, as if drawn by different hands. She started researching the house's history, scouring local archives online. The property had changed hands dozens of times in the past century, each owner staying less than a year. There were no records of deaths or tragedies, but Emily found forum posts from neighbors, cryptic warnings about that house on the hill and its hungry walls. One user claimed the previous owners had fled after finding something in the basement, but the post was deleted before she could read more. Her calls to the realtor went unanswered, and the seller's name on the deed was a dead end, a trust with no listed beneficiaries. Determined to understand, Emily bought a crowbar and pried open the basement door. The air that rushed out was cold, damp, and carried a faint metallic tang. The stairs descended into darkness, the light switched dead. Armed with a flashlight, she stepped down, each creak of the wood amplifying her heartbeat. The basement was vast, its concrete walls slick with moisture. Old furniture was stacked in one corner, chairs, a cracked mirror, a child's crib, covered in dust so thick it looked like ash. In the center of the room was a trapdoor, its edges sealed with what looked like wax, now cracked and peeling. She hesitated, her breath visible in the beam of light, then knelt to inspect the trapdoor. It was heavy, iron, with no handle, only a faint inscription scratched into the surface, "Do not look." Her fingers trembled as she traced the words, and for a moment, she thought she heard a whisper, not from below, but behind her, soft and urgent, like a warning. She spun around, the flashlight sweeping the room, but nothing was there. The air grew colder, pressing against her skin, and the trapdoor seemed to hum faintly, matching the pulse she'd felt in the walls. Back upstairs, she didn't tell Mark about the basement. He'd dismiss it, and she wasn't ready to face his skepticism. Instead, she focused on the attic, borrowing a ladder to reach the hatch. The bolts were rusted, but they gave way with effort, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling upward. The attic was cramped, its air thick with the smell of mildew. Boxes of old clothes and photos littered the floor, none newer than the 1950s. In one corner, she found a notebook, its pages brittle and yellowed. The handwriting was erratic, a mix of pleas and warnings. "It sees everything, the walls remember, don't sleep." The final page was a drawing of an eye, identical to the carvings, surrounded by frantic scribbles. That night, the house felt different, angrier. The creaks were replaced by thumps, heavy and deliberate, like something pacing the halls. Emily clutched the notebook, rereading its pages, each word tightening the knot in her chest. She heard Mark scream, a sharp, guttural sound that cut off abruptly. She ran to the bedroom, but he was asleep, unharmed, his face pale and slick with sweat. The window was open, though she swore they'd locked it. Outside, the backyard was empty, but the grass was flattened in a perfect circle, as if something had stood there, watching. Emily couldn't sleep anymore. The house was a presence now, its every sound a message she couldn't decipher. She stopped unpacking, stopped pretending this was their fresh start. Mark was changing too, distant, his eyes glassy, his laughter forced. He spent hours in the garage, staring at tools as if they held answers. When she asked what was wrong, he'd snap, then apologize, claiming he was tired. But she saw the way he glanced at the walls, like he felt it too. She returned to the basement, driven by a need to confront whatever was hiding. The trapdoor was still there, its inscription now smeared, as if someone had tried to erase it. She brought a hammer, striking the iron until it groaned and gave way. Below was a tunnel, its walls rough-hewn stone, stretching into darkness. The air was thick, almost liquid, and her flashlight barely pierced it. She took a step, then another, her shoes scraping against the floor. The tunnel sloped downward, and soon she was crouching, the ceiling pressing closer. Whispers filled the air, not words, but fragments of sound, like voices trapped in static. At the tunnel's end was a chamber, its walls covered in carvings, thousands of eyes, overlapping, staring. In the center was a mirror, its surface black, reflecting nothing. Emily approached, her reflection absent, and touched the glass. It was warm, pulsing faintly, and for a moment, she saw something move within it, not her, but a shape, vast and formless, its edges bleeding into the dark. She stumbled back, her flashlight flickering, and ran, the whispers chasing her until she slammed the trapdoor shut. Back in the house, Mark was waiting, his face blank. He didn't ask where she'd been, only said, "We can't leave." His voice was flat, not his own. That night, the house roared to life, doors slammed, windows rattled, and the hum returned, louder, shaking the walls. Emily barricaded them in the bedroom, but the sounds followed, clawing at the door. She found the notebook again, its pages now blank except for one word, written over and over, stay. By morning, Mark was gone. His car was still in the driveway, his shoes by the door. Emily searched every room, screaming his name, but the house swallowed her voice. In the living room, she found a new carving, an eye, larger, fresher, its edges wet with sap. She packed a bag, her hands shaking, and ran to the car. As she drove away, the house loomed in her rearview mirror, its windows glinting like eyes. She swore she saw Mark standing on the porch, motionless, watching her go. Emily never returned. The house was sold again, the price even lower. She lives in a small apartment now, far from that town, but she still feels it sometimes, a weight on her chest, a hum in her ears. She doesn't sleep much, and when she does, she dreams of eyes, endless and unblinking, carved into the walls of her mind. The old Victorian on Maple Street had been vacant for years, its paint peeling like dead skin, its windows clouded with grime. When Sarah and her daughter, Lily, moved in, the neighbors watched from behind curtains, their faces tight with something unspoken. Sarah didn't care, she needed a fresh start after the divorce, and the rent was dirt cheap. The house was a fixer-upper, sure, but it had charm, stained glass in the entryway, a clawfoot tub, a fireplace that promised cozy winters. Lily, only 7, was thrilled, already naming the rooms after her stuffed animals. The first day was chaotic, movers tripping over warped floorboards, Sarah scrubbing decades of dust from the counters. The house groaned under their footsteps, its bones creaking as if protesting their presence. By evening, they were exhausted, collapsing onto a couch in the living room. Lily fell asleep instantly, but Sarah stayed up, sipping tea, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. That's when she heard it, a whisper, so soft she thought it was her imagination. It came from the corner of the room, where the shadows seemed thicker, pooling like ink. She strained to listen, but the words slipped away, leaving only a chill. The next morning, Lily was quiet, picking at her cereal. When Sarah asked what was wrong, she said, "The house talked to me last night." Sarah laughed, assuming it was a dream, but Lily's eyes were serious, her voice small. "It said it's happy we're here." Uneasy, Sarah changed the subject, but she couldn't shake the memory of the whisper. That day, she noticed odd details, a door that wouldn't stay closed, a mirror in the hallway that seemed to distort her reflection, stretching her face just enough to feel wrong. The air felt heavy, like it was clinging to her skin. At night, the whispers returned, louder, coming from every corner of the house. They weren't words Sarah could understand, just a low, rhythmic murmur, like a crowd chanting in the distance. She checked on Lily, who was curled up in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "They're talking again," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. Sarah stayed with her, singing lullabies until she fell asleep, but the whispers followed her back to her own room. They seemed to grow louder when she closed her eyes, as if the house was leaning closer, eager to be heard. By the third day, Sarah was jumpy, snapping at Lily for small things. She told herself it was stress, but the house felt different now, watchful, its corners always just out of sight. She found a trapdoor in the pantry, hidden under a rug, its lock rusted but intact. When she touched it, the whispers stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so deep it hurt her ears. She backed away, heart racing, and decided not to tell Lily. That night, the whispers changed, sharper now, almost pleading, and Sarah swore she heard her name woven into the sound. Sarah started avoiding the corners of the house, keeping to the center of rooms, her eyes darting to the shadows. The whispers were constant now, a low hum that followed her from morning to night. Lily was different too, she stopped playing, stopped smiling, spending hours staring at the walls. When Sarah asked what she was doing, Lily said, "Listening to the house. It knows things." Her words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, but she didn't press, afraid of what Lily might say next. Desperate for answers, Sarah visited the town library, digging through old records. The house had a history, nothing dramatic, just a string of tenants who left quickly, citing personal reasons. One article mentioned a family in the 1920s who claimed the house spoke to them, but the details were vague, dismissed as superstition. The librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, watched Sarah closely. "You're in the Maple Street house, aren't you?" she said, her voice low. When Sarah nodded, the woman leaned in. "Be careful. It doesn't let go easily." Back home, the house felt smaller, its walls closing in. Sarah noticed scratches on the baseboards, faint but fresh, like something had clawed at them. The mirrors were worse, every reflection showed a flicker of movement behind her, gone when she turned. She covered them with sheets, but the whispers grew louder, angrier, as if offended. Lily started sleepwalking, wandering to the pantry, standing over the trapdoor. Sarah found her there one night, muttering words that weren't English, her eyes blank. When she woke her, Lily cried, saying, "They want me to open it." Sarah bought a new lock for the trapdoor, heavy and modern, but it didn't help. The whispers seeped through the walls, curling around her thoughts. She stopped sleeping, her dreams filled with faceless shapes crowding the corners of her vision. One night, she woke to find Lily gone. Panic surged as she searched the house, calling her name. She found her in the attic, a space Sarah hadn't explored, kneeling before a pile of old toys, dolls with missing eyes, tin soldiers bent and twisted. Lily was whispering, her voice blending with the house's murmur, and when Sarah pulled her away, the toys rattled, as if trying to follow. Sarah knew they couldn't stay. The house was no longer a home, it was a trap, its whispers weaving tighter around them. Lily was fading, her skin pale, her eyes sunken, as if the house was draining her. Sarah packed their bags, working quickly, ignoring the way the doors slammed shut on their own. The whispers were a roar now, filling the air, vibrating in her bones. She called a friend to stay with, but the phone cut out mid-sentence, the line dead. She tried the trapdoor one last time, hoping to understand what the house wanted. The lock was gone, the door ajar, a cold wind rising from below. She didn't go down, she couldn't, but she heard it, a chorus of voices, not whispers anymore, calling her name, Lily's name, promising things she couldn't comprehend. She slammed the door shut, dragging a cabinet over it, but the voices followed, louder, clearer, weaving through the walls. That night, the house fought back. Windows cracked, their edges curling inward like mouths. The light surged, bulbs popping in showers of sparks. Lily screamed, clutching Sarah's arm, as the corners of the room seemed to stretch, the shadows twisting into shapes, tall, thin, their edges blurred. Sarah grabbed Lily and ran, the front door sticking, then flying open as if the house had relented. They stumbled into the yard, the night air sharp and clean, the whispers fading behind them. They never went back. Sarah rented a new place, small but bright, far from Maple Street. Lily started smiling again, slowly, but she never spoke of the house. Sarah didn't either, though she felt it sometimes, a faint murmur in her dreams, a shadow in the corner of her eye. The house is still there, vacant again, its windows dark. Neighbors say it's quiet now, but they don't go near it. They hear things, they say, when the wind is right, whispers, calling for someone new. The duplex on Elmwood Lane was perfect for Jake, a single dad looking to rebuild after a rough year. It was modern, affordable, and close to his daughter Mia's school. The landlord was eager to rent, practically shoving the keys into Jake's hands. The place was spotless, with fresh carpet and white walls, though Jake noticed an odd detail: one room, tucked at the end of the hall, had no windows. It was small, maybe 10 by 10, with a single bulb overhead. The landlord called it a storage room, but it felt off, like it didn't belong. Mia loved the duplex, racing through the rooms, her laughter filling the space. Jake was relieved, she'd been quiet since her mom left, and this move felt like a chance to heal. They settled in quickly, filling the house with their things, though Jake avoided the windowless room. Something about it made his stomach twist. The air was too still, the light too harsh. He locked it, telling Mia it was for junk, but she didn't seem to care, too busy decorating her bedroom with stickers. The first night was peaceful, the kind of quiet Jake hadn't felt in months. But around 3 a.m., he woke to a sound, a low thud, like something heavy shifting. It came from the hall, near the locked room. He checked on Mia, who was fast asleep, then crept toward the noise. The door was still locked, the handle cold, but the thud came again, softer, from inside. He pressed his ear to the wood and heard nothing, just his own heartbeat. Shaking it off, he went back to bed, blaming the new house's quirks. The next day, Mia was chatty, but she kept glancing at the hall. When Jake asked why, she said, "The door was open last night. I saw it." Jake frowned. He'd checked the lock himself. He tested it again, finding it secure, and told Mia she dreamed it. But her eyes were uneasy, and Jake felt a prickle of doubt. That evening, he noticed the bulb in the living room flickering, casting odd shadows that seemed to linger too long. The air felt charged, like before a storm, though the sky was clear. By the third night, the thuds were regular, always around the same time, always from the windowless room. Jake tried to ignore them, but Mia started waking up, saying she heard knocking that wouldn't stop. He moved her mattress to his room, hoping it would help, but the sounds followed, now joined by a faint hum, like static from an old radio. Jake checked the room again, unlocking it with a flashlight. It was empty, the walls bare, but the air was thick, pressing against him. He locked it quickly, his hands shaking, and swore he'd call the landlord in the morning. Jake couldn't reach the landlord, the number went straight to voicemail, and emails bounced back. He started noticing more, the thermostat never held steady, spiking hot then cold. The mirrors fogged up, even without a shower running. And Mia, she was drawing pictures of a dark room with shapes inside, tall and thin, their edges smudged. When Jake asked about them, she said, "They live in the room. They don't like the door closed." He searched online for the duplex history but found nothing, no sales records, no tenant reviews, just a blank spot where the address should be. The neighbors were no help, avoiding his questions, their smiles tight. One older man, watering his lawn, muttered, "Don't stay long," before hurrying inside. Jake's unease grew, but he couldn't afford to move, not yet. He focused on Mia, keeping her busy with games, but she was slipping, quiet, jumpy, her eyes darting to the hall. The thuds became knocks, sharp and insistent, every night. Jake bought a deadbolt for the room, installing it himself, but the knocks grew louder, shaking the frame. He tried recording them, but his phone caught only static, the sound distorted. One night, he woke to find the deadbolt undone, the door cracked open. Inside, the room was empty, but the bulb was swinging, casting wild shadows. He slammed the door shut, his heart pounding, and wedged a chair under the handle. Mia stopped sleeping, her drawings darker now, eyes in the walls, hands reaching from the floor. Jake took her to a doctor, who suggested stress, but Jake knew better. The house was doing this, the room at its heart. He pried up the carpet in the room, hoping for clues, and found scratches in the wood, deep, frantic, like something had tried to claw its way out. The air grew heavier, the hum louder, and Jake started hearing whispers, not words but tones, cold and hungry. Jake decided to leave, money or not. He packed their bags, booking a motel nearby. But the house seemed to know, lights surged, plunging them into darkness. The knocks were constant now, not just at night, echoing through the walls. Mia clung to him, whispering, "They're mad we're going." Jake didn't ask who they was. He felt it too, a presence in the room, spilling into the house, watching them. He tried the door one last time, armed with a crowbar, determined to face it. The room was different now, the walls seemed closer, the air so thick he could barely breathe. The bulb flickered, and in its light, he saw them, shapes in the corners, tall, their edges shifting like smoke. They didn't move, but he felt their weight, their anger. He swung the crowbar, hitting nothing but air, and ran, the doors slamming behind him. They left that night, the duplex dark behind them. Jake didn't look back, but Mia did, her voice small. "The door's open," she said. He drove faster, the motel's lights a beacon. They never returned, leaving everything behind. The duplex was razed months later, the lot left empty. Jake and Mia moved far away, starting over, but the room lingers in their dreams, a dark space, windowless, waiting. Sometimes, Jake hears a knock, faint but clear, and checks the locks, just to be sure.